Hey, Walter Sorrells back with more tips for the knife maker. Today, making a sandpaper caddy. So, other than steel, this stuff is the most important material that a knife maker uses. Abrasives. Now they come in all shapes and sizes and delivery systems, but the most basic and probably the most versatile, yep, it's this stuff, just good old sandpaper. Now because knife makers use a lot of different kinds of sandpaper, it's always good to have some kind of little caddy or shelf type system that you can store a whole bunch of different grit sizes and types of sandpaper and so on. So I've been storing my sandpaper in this piece of crap plastic caddy for about 20 years, and it's been broken and sucking for about 10 of those years. After some minor repairs and adjustments, I decided maybe it was time for a new one. Today, we're gonna make it. Just bought myself a table saw, so this will be kind of a shakeout cruise for the new saw. The design is pretty table saw centric, basically the only power tool required here. I made some plans using Fusion 360, so I'll be using them here as a guide while I cut the stock for the project. The only materials involved will be MDF and some very thin plywood. Now, if you're a real cabinet maker and you use hand planes and all that stuff, you probably despise MDF. That's medium density fiberboard if you haven't used it before. Like all materials, you have to understand what you're working with. MDF is easy to chip, it's easy to break, and God forbid it gets wet because it'll swell, buckle, crumble, rot. The worst parts of it are really pretty bad, but on the flip side, really easy to work with, completely predictable, and extremely flat. As always, by the way, my plans are available on my Patreon page. If you step up and support the channel on YouTube at any level, you'll get access to the plans shown here and tons more. Now, the philosophy for this build here is cheap, easy, simple, get back to work. Basically, I've got two sides, a top and a bottom, and then a back, all cut on the table saw. Ultimately, everything will be glued and screwed. Next, I'll cut the joints. I'll run a couple of tests on scrap pieces to get the table saw set up, and then I'll start running the real parts. The joint I'm using here, I guess technically is called a double rabbet. Look, it's not very strong, but it's super easy to do, especially on a table saw, and it'll still make for a box that's a good deal stronger than if everything was just butt jointed together. This is not the project or the material for dovetails and all that kind of stuff. The box is very small, won't be subjected to any stress, and so there's just no reason to over-engineer it. So, a quick trial shows everything fitting together perfectly. Now, time for the shelves. These will be made from 1/4-inch plywood, again, just whacked up on the table saw. The shelves will fit into slots in the walls of the caddy. The kerf of my saw is right at 1/8 of an inch, just a hair more probably. So by doing 2 cuts exactly 1/8 of an inch apart, I'm able to make a slot that perfectly fits the shelves. Again, a test cut is always in order with this kind of thing. If you do a project like this and find the slots a hair too tight after cutting 30 slots, you'll be more than a little ticked off. So now it's just a question of setting the fence at the distances on my drawing and blasting away. I've also slotted the rear panel of the caddy. The rationale here is that by making the shelves bare in 3 slots as opposed to just 2, it'll dramatically increase the caddy's resistance to racking and then collapsing. Again, you know, a little strategy to make up for the deficiencies of the MDF. Now I'll use the rotary table on my mill to mill finger slots into the shelves and the base panel. Look, this is one of these gilding the lily things, really not that important. If you're doing this project, you can just leave them out completely if you don't have the right equipment to do it, or you could cut them with a router, you could hog them out with a belt grinder, you can cut them with a hole saw. There are tons of ways to skin this cat. After a little sanding to smooth everything up, I'll do another trial assembly as a final bozo test to make sure I haven't screwed something up. Then I'll glue and clamp the box. The glue is really just there to hold everything in place for the screws that I'll put in later. With everything glued up, here come the screws. Screws and MDF don't play all that nice together, but again, this is a very light duty box. You definitely want to drill pilot holes and don't over tighten the screws or they'll split the material or strip out. I also countersunk these to make room for the heads too. A little paint. And we're done. Ready to bust out the sandpaper and start cleaning up some knives. Thanks for watching, guys. If you feel like you got something out of this video, don't forget to subscribe. Also, click on the link to Patreon for a great way to give back to the channel. Plus, check me out on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Links in the description. If you want something sharp and pointy, maybe a gift for yourself or one of the cooler people in your life, check out my Tactics Armory website and pick up one of our tactical or outdoor knives. And finally, if you want to learn to make Hamones or Japanese swords, check out WalterSorrellsBlades.com, where you can find videos about how I make Hamones, as well as forging, mounting, polishing, and fittings for Japanese swords. Thanks, and see you soon.